Tonight, the wind howls through the Montana mountains, carrying with it the memory of a night that froze time itself. Imagine it. The year is 1903. A train, threatened powerful, like a steel serpent, cuts through the American Northwest. Its passengers are weary yet hopeful. But as night deepens and snow begins to fall, that train, a symbol of a young nation's pride, will find itself trapped, buried in a silent, white tomb. This is the story of the great American snow train disaster of 1903, stranded in a blizzard. Before we begin, I'd like to welcome you, whether you're listening in the USA, wrapped in a warm blanket in the quiet hours past midnight, or perhaps from Canada where snow may still whisper against your window, or from Europe where the morning light might just be beginning to brighten your curtains. Wherever you are, whatever time it is, take a deep breath now, slow your thoughts, and prepare for a journey through icy survival and the quiet endurance of the human spirit. If you enjoy stories like this, these tales from the edge of history, filled with mystery, courage, and the cold beauty of winter, remember to give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment sharing where and when you're watching tonight. Your presence keeps these stories alive. Now settle in. Let the world outside grow quiet. If you wish, close your eyes and let the story begin. It was the morning of January 29, 1903, as the westbound train known as the Northern Express pulled out of Spokane, its iron wheels hissing on the rails like a great beast exhaling steam into the crisp winter night. Snow had been falling for days. Steady, unending, yet the schedule was ironclad, and the station men had sworn the passes through the Bitterroot Mountains would remain clear. Inside the carriages, warm golden light flickered through frosted windows. Coal stoves glowed dimly in the corners, their heat mingling with the faint sense of oil and wool. Passengers murmured, their voices mostly lost beneath the steady rhythm of the engine. Among them were traveling salesmen, families heading home, a mail clerk who never removed his gloves, and a young schoolteacher named Clara Hensley, a notebook on her lap, holding the promise of a new life in Portland. Outside, the wind pressed against the glass like impatient ghosts. Trees bent under the weight of the snow. The mountains grew taller and darker with every mile, their peaks lost in low hanging clouds. Engineer Samuel Crane kept one hand steady on the throttle, the other near the brass whistle cord. He had seen blizzards before, fierce ones, but never like this. By 3 or 4 in the afternoon, the snow on the tracks deepened, and the train slowed to a crawl. Snowplow crews at remote stations worked tirelessly, clearing drifts higher than a man's chest. Yet for every mile cleared, new flakes fell, relentless, binding, hinting at something vast and inescapable. In the dining car, Tara watched the blurred white outside and wrote in her notebook, "The world outside is gone. There's only snow now." She did not yet know how true those words would become. Night fell, and passengers tucked coats and blankets closer, anticipating a delay but still trusting in the power of the rails. Lanterns swayed gently with the train's slow rhythm. Somewhere deep in the mountains, a long whistle blew, long and low, mournful sounds swallowed by the storm. The Northern Express continued into the dock, unaware that before dawn, it would be fighting not just snow, but time itself. By the time the first weak light filtered through the blizzard, the Northern Express was deep in the Bitterroot Mountains, a realm of jagged peaks, dense pines, and canyons carved by centuries of cold. Snowflakes the size of silver dollars fell from an ash-colored sky, and the train's once confident rhythm had slowed to a cautious, uncertain heartbeat. Passengers awoke to the gentle rocking of the cars, though gentle was no longer the right word. The motion felt labored, as if the train were waiting through something heavy and unseen. Stoves crackled low, their heat struggling against the chill seeping through door seams. Somewhere, a child coughed softly in the second-class carriage. Conductor Mr. Avery moved down the aisle with a lantern, his breath visible even inside. "Just a delay," he reassured a woman clutching a sleeping infant. "They'll be through the pass by noon." But even as he spoke, Snow beat harder against the windows, and a muffled roar seemed to come from all sides. Engineer Samuel Crane peered through the frosted glass of the cab. Visibility had dropped to just a few yards. His fireman, young Eli Turner, shuffled coal with weary arms, his face flushed and damp with heat and fear. Ahead, the tracks curved along a cliff edge, dropping into a frozen gorge on one side, rising steeply into shadowed pines on the other. A whistle tore through the storm, a long, aching blast, warning any nearby work crews that the express was still running. But no one answered, and no echo returned, only the heavy silence of the snow. Back in the passenger car, Clara Hensley rested her open notebook on her lap, heel handwriting wavering with the train's slow rock. She wrote, "It feels as if we are no longer traveling through the world, but through a dream of the world. The windows are white, the sky is white, the earth is white, and all of it has vanished but this." Near noon, the train approached the tiny outpost of Copper Creek, a station built mostly of timber and hope. It was meant for summer miners, but now it was nearly buried, its roof barely visible under a dome of snow. Telegraph lines sagged, heavy with ice, the wires silent. Samuel slowed the train to a crawl, hoping to find the track ahead still clear, but the snow had swallowed it whole. His heart sank. "We stop here," he whispered. "We wait it out." Brakes hissed. The great steel wheels ground to a halt. Outside, the snow swirled endlessly, thickly. No sky. No earth. Only white. Passengers pressed their faces to the glass, watching the snow pile higher against the windows. Clara noticed the silence for the first time. Not the silence of calm, but of distance. The kind that makes you realize how far you are from everything else. In the warm, flickering light of the dining car, the conductor lit more lamps. Trying to push back the gloom, people whispered, shoved in, waited for news. No one yet guessed they would be at Copper Creek for many days. By the next morning, the blizzard had grown into something almost alive. It no longer just fell. Its world, thick and constant, as if the sky itself had turned to powdered glass. From the cab, Samuel Crane could barely see the front of his own locomotive, and even the whistle seemed to be swallowed, muffled by a world made entirely of snow. Inside the cars, despite the red embers in the stoves, the air grew cold. The train's coal supply was running low, and firemen carefully rationed each civil fuel. Brass fittings along the walls felt icy to the touch, and condensation froze into ghostly shapes on the window panes. Every exhale became a faint mist, hanging in the air for a moment before vanishing. The passengers spoke little now. The initial excitement of the delay had passed, replaced by a quiet worry that flowed between the cars like a cold draft. A farmer from Idaho uttered prayers under his breath. Another tried to keep her children busy with stories of snow angels and Christmas mornings. But her voice trembled as she neared the end. Clara Hensley watched it all, her notebook open. She described how the lanterns flickered when the wind pressed against the train, how the pine trees outside bent like weary giants, how time itself seemed to slow. Every tick of her small travel clock felt unnaturally loud. At noon, Conductor Avery gathered the passengers in the dining car. His cap was dusted with melting snow, his cheeks rough from the cold. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice low and steady, "are stopped at Copper Creek until the line ahead can be cleared. The telegraph wires are down, so we cannot send word yet. But we will be fine. We have heat, food, and shelter. Stay calm, stay warm." A murmur of relief swept through the group, though beneath it lay a thread of fear. A man in a fur coat asked how long they might be delayed. Avery hesitated before answering. "It depends on the snow," he said softly. That night, the storm returned with renewed fury. Wind screamed through the pass, hurling snow against the cars until the windows rattled. The entire train groaned, its metal frame straining under the weight of the drifts beginning to pile around it. The view outside vanished completely. No horizon, no stars, only endless, turning white, Fireman Eli Turner had gone out to check the locomotive's water tank. When he returned, his coat was sheathed in ice, his face pale as stone. "It's bad out there," he whispered to Samuel. "The tracks are gone. Buried." Samuel said nothing. He just stared into the dark where the rail should have been, feeling the first faint stirrings of fear. In the sleeper car, passengers lay awake, listening to the winds roar and the timbers creak. Somewhere, an infant whimpered softly until it fell silent. Then, near midnight, Clara wrote her final words of the day. "It feels as if the world has been erased and we are the only ones left. The snow is no longer just outside the train. It feels as if it has found its way inside." Morning did not come easily. The sky outside remained the same pale gray as the night before. No sunrise, no color, only a dim, cold light that made the world look as if it had frozen in time. Passengers awoke to find the windows half-minus buried. The view was reduced to a narrow white strip pressed against the glass. The Northern Express was no longer just stopped on the tracks. It was buried in snow. Conductor Avery and several men tried to open a side door, but it moved only an inch before snow poured in, fine as sand, bitingly cold. The air outside shimmered with frost crystals, faintly glittering like dust floating in a dream. The interior temperature dropped quickly. Even with the stoves burning, the warmth never reached the far ends of the cars. Exhaled breath hung in long clouds. Blankets were gathered, coats shared, candles lit. Someone began boiling water on the dining car stove to fight the chill, and the smell of damp woolen smoke filled the air, tearily defying the fading light. Samuel Crane stood in the locomotive cab, watching the condensation on the glass freeze. His fireman Eli huddled beside him, rubbing his hands. "It's not letting up," Samuel whispered. His voice was low, steady, but beneath it lay exhaustion. "If the rotary plows don't come by tomorrow, we'll have to dig ourselves out." Eli let out a faint laugh. "Sort and brittle." "Dig with what?" "Coffee spoons." Both fell silent. Outside, the snow fell silently, but the silence inside was almost oppressive. A silence so deep that even the slightest movement seemed to echo. The usual rhythms of life on a train, the hum, the chatter, the pulse of the wheels had vanished completely. In the second minus class car, Clara Hensley sat with her notebook open again. The paper was now wrinkled, the ink faint where moisture had touched it. She watched the others, a farmer sharpening a pocket knife for comfort, a small boy pressing his ear to the window to listen to the snow, an old woman softly humming hymns. Clara wrote, "No one speaks much now. The storm has stolen our words. All that's left is the wind." And even that sound seems tired now. By afternoon, the light dimmed again, though the day had barely passed. Time felt strange, day and night blending into one long, blurred gray. Passengers began rationing their food, just in case. Dining car cooks served thin broth, hard bread, and coffee that grew weaker with every pot. Yet in the uncertainty, there were small acts of kindness. Eamon shared his flask with another who was shivering from the cold. His mother sang softly to soothe her child. Clara offered to read from her notebook, her voice gentle but steady, her rhythm giving the others something human to hold on to. When she finished, a passenger, an old gentleman in a wool cap, whispered, "Read again tomorrow. It helps." That night, as the lights burned low, Samuel and Eli took turns staying awake in the cab. Outside, the snow pressed against the train like a sleeping beast, heavy and patient. Inside, the passengers finally drifted into uneasy sleep, wrapped in layers of woolen silence. And somewhere deep in the store, a low, distant rumble echoed through the mountains, not thunder, but the weight of shifting snow above, a warning, soft but real, that the mountain itself was stirring. By the fifth morning, the train no longer looked like a train at all. From the outside, if anyone could have seen it resembled a row of buried cabins, only the tops of the roofs and faint black chimney pipes peeking through the deep, wind-packed snow. Inside, the air was thin, cold enough to make lungs ache if one breathed too quickly. Frost crept along the inner walls, forming lace-like patterns that caught the lantern light, faintly shimmering like trap stars. The snow was quiet, unnervingly so. When the wind wasn't howling through the mountains, there was only the subtle groan of settling snow and the faint tick of cooling metal. Every sound inside the cars was amplified. The crackle of the stoves, the shuffle of boots on the floorboards, the slow drip of melting frost near the windows. And Dr. Avery moved from car to car, his once crisp uniform, now worn and smudged with soot. He paused to reassure passengers, check the stoves, and gauge their dwindling coal supply. The news was grim. Maybe 3 days if we're careful, he murmured to Samuel Crane. Or if we stretch it. Samuel rubbed his eyes, red from sleep-suns. The line crews, still no sign. The telegraph is dead. We're on our own. Outside, the wind picked up again, scraping dry snow across the buried cars. The sound was like sun shifting on a distant shore, soft, constant, hypnotic. Clara Hensley spent her morning near one of the stoves, trying to keep her hands warm enough to write. Her ink was beginning to thicken in the cold, turning sluggish in her pen. Her words came slower now, till she wrote, "The snow presses on us, like seawater on a ship lost beneath it. We are all listening for the whistle that never comes, for the rescue that never arrives." A small boy named Henry sat beside her, watching her hand move. "Are you writing about us?" he asked. Clara faintly smiled. "I think so." He nodded with a solemn understanding. "Then, maybe someone will find it," he said. "When it's spring again." His words lingered long after he had run back to his mother's lap. As evening fell, the lanterns burned low, their oil nearly gone. The light dimmed to an amber glow, painting the cars in soft, golden shadows. The air faintly smelled of coal smoke, candle wax, and woolly scent that would come to mean survival to those inside. Then just before full dark, a faint vibration rippled through the floorboards. A tremor so slight most would have missed it, but Samuel felt it. So did Eli, who was tending the firebox. "What was that?" Eli whispered. Samuel's head snapped up, listening. At first, nothing. Then came a low, rolling sound, not from the train, but from the mountain itself. A deep, distant groan. "The snow is shifting," Samuel said after a long pause. "The ridge above is heavy. Might be nothing. Could be an avalanche higher up." Eli swallowed hard. "Will it reach us?" Samuel didn't answer immediately. His gaze stayed fixed on the window where the snow pressed like a white wall against the glass. "Finally," he said, "if it comes, we won't hear it coming." That night, passengers huddled closer than before. Some prayed, some whispered stories of home, and some simply stared into the dim light, listening to the mountain breathe above them. Outside, unseen, an ice cornice high up on the ridge cracked. The sound was soft, barely more than a sigh. Then it was gone, buried in the endless storm. That night, the blizzard returned with a vengeance. What had been a steady snowfall became a blinding white fury, as if the entire sky had decided to descend upon the mountains. The wind shrieked through the canyons, carrying sharp pellets of ice that hissed as they struck the buried train. Windows rattled in their frames, lantern flames shivered, and passengers gripped their blankets tighter, feeling the force of nature pressing in from all sides. In the cab, Samuel Crane kept watch as best he could. The locomotive's gauges trembled faintly, though most of the dials were frozen in place. He leaned close to the glass, trying to see through the frosty blur outside. But there was nothing. No stars, no ridges, no boundary between earth and sky. The world outside was reduced to movement sound. Eli Turner sat by the firebox, staring into the embers. His hands trembled from exhaustion. "Feels like it's getting closer," he murmured. Samuel slowly nodded. "The storm is thickening. If the pass above us breaks," he didn't finish the sentence. There was no need. They both knew what would happen when tons of snow gave way. In the dining car, passengers lay wrapped in coats, softly whispering. The smell of burned coffee and damp wool hung in the air. Several men had earlier in the evening taken turns knocking ice from the windows, but Even that now seemed futile. The glass was sealed again, frozen solid. Clara Hensley remained awake long after the others had fallen asleep. Her journal lay open before her, though she had stopped writing. She simply watched the lamplight flicker and fade along the wood panels. Her thoughts drifted to her family in Missouri, to her mother who loved lilacs, to her brother who had given her the notebook she now held. She tried to recall the color of spring grass there. It felt impossibly far away. The storm roared louder. The entire train seemed to tremble. Somewhere outside, a sharp crack echoed, like thunder, but closer. Then came a low, continuous rumbling. The air itself seemed to thicken with it. Samuel and Eli both froze. "That's it," Eli whispered, his voice barely audible. But that was he never finished. The mountain moved. It began with a rumble, a growl from deep within the earth, then a sudden rushing roar that grew into an all-consuming sound. An avalanche broke loose. Millions of pounds of snow, ice and rock tumbled down the slope, faster than wind, hungrier than water. The sound swallowed everything. The scream of the wind, the rattle of windows, the desperate shouts inside the cars. When the first wave of snow hit, the Northern Express shuddered violently. Snow slammed into the cars like a wall of glass. Lights went out. Passengers were thrown from their seats, and the world became chaos. White, blinding, deafening chaos. Then as suddenly as it had come, silence returned. The snow settled. Echoes faded into the distance. Inside the buried train, no one spoke for a long time. The only sounds were the slow dripping of melting frost and the faint, uneven breath of those still awake. Somewhere in the darkness, Clara's voice broke the silence. Soft, trembling. Were we still moving? Samuel's answer came after a long pause, distant and hollow. No, we are not. The Northern Express was now completely buried, killed beneath the avalanche, beneath the storm, beneath the mountain that had finally fallen asleep. When dawn came again, if it could still be called dawn, it brought no light, only a faint change in the darkness. The train lay utterly still under the weight of the mountain, its cars buried beneath yards of snow and ice. The air inside was thick and stale, each breath slow and deliberate, as if everyone had become aware that oxygen itself had grown precious. Samuel Crane was the first to move. His head throbbed from hitting the cab wall, and his left shoulder burned with pain. Eli lay beside him, dazed, but alive. For a moment, the two men just listened to the creak of settling metal, the soft patter of snow dislodging from above, and the muffled whimpers drifting from farther down the train. "Are we buried?" Eli finally asked. His voice was a hoarse whisper. Samuel looked at the window. Far, where the window should have been. Only darkness stared back. "Completely," he said quietly. "We're under it." In the passenger cars, lanterns flickered weakly, giving off barely more than a golden haze. The avalanche had crushed the last baggage car, faulting it like paper. The rest of the train had survived, damaged, but miraculously intact. Yet the snow pressed so tightly against the walls that it muffled every sound. The world outside was gone. Clara Hensley awoke with her head resting on her notebook. The impact had thrown her from her seat, and papers were scattered across the floor. She slowly gathered them, her fingers numb, her exhaled breath clouding before her. Round her, passengers stirred in confusion, some crying, others silent, staring into nothing. Conductor Avery moved through the cars, his uniform torn and dusted with frost. "Everyone stay calm," he gently called, though his own voice trembled. "The avalanche hit us, but the cars are holding. We need to conserve our air and heat. No fires for now." Someone in the back began to pray aloud, the words trembling through the heavy air. Another passenger, a farmer from Idaho, began checking for injuries, bandaging a woman's hand with his scarf. In the dim lamplight, faces looked pale and hollow, eyes wide as though the darkness itself were watching. Nayland and Eli forced open the small hatch above the cab, hoping to find a gap of air. There was only snow, dense, packed, unyielding. They took turns scraping at it with a coal shovel, but it was useless. The weight was too great. Back in the cars, Clara wrote again, cup and trembling between her fingers. It feels as if we are inside a tomb of snow. The air is heavy, thick with the breath of those beside me. No one dare speak above a whisper, as if the mountain could erupt and come down again. Hours passed. Sorry. Only by the dimming of the lamps and the faint groans of metal, the train was beginning to cool. The heat from the stoves long gone, the air growing brittle. Frost formed on the glass of Clara's ink bottle. Somewhere, a child whimpered, "Grandma, I can't see the sky anymore." His mother held him close and whispered, "The sky is just sleeping. Dear, we'll see it again, sir." But even as she said it, her eyes glistened with fear. That night, though time had lost all meaning, passengers lay awake in silence, counting their breaths, straining their ears for any hint of rescue. But there was only stillness. The snow above them held fast, patient, and eternal. Outside, the mountains were once more quiet. No wind, no echo, only the endless, indifferent calm of winter after its fury has passed. On the third day, beneath the snow, the morning began. The lanterns had long since burnt low, leaving only the faint orange glow of candles to mark the passage of time. The air inside the train had grown dense, warm near the stoves but sharp and thin at the far end of each car. Every movement, every whisper felt heavy, as if the air itself resisted being disturbed. Samuel Crane moved from the cab to the first passenger car, his face pale beneath the soot. His breath was short, the oxygen already thinning. He carried a coal shovel. It sat still from scraping at the hatch all night. "We can't dig out," he said softly to Conductor Avery. "Snow is too compact. We'd suffocate before we reached open air." Avery grimly nodded. "Then we wait. If the line crews are still working below the mountain, someone will come." He didn't add the unspoken truth hanging between them. The telegraph lines had likely been down for days, and rescue might not come until the storm cleared, or until the spring thawed the pass. In the dining car, the passengers had grown quieter with each hour. The youngest children slept fitfully in their mothers' arms, cheeks flushed from the stale air. Older passengers sat wrapped in blankets, as half-minded, conserving what strength they could. The world outside might have been another planet, unreachable, unseen. Clara Hensley sat near the central stove, her notebook on her lap. The ink was nearly frozen, but she kept writing, her handwriting faint and small to save space and effort. The candles burn lower with every hour. No one says it aloud, but we can all hear the air. It feels thin, strained. Every breath is a measure of time. At noon, or what they guessed was noon, a strange stillness settled over everything. Even the faint sounds of metal creaking and dice shifting had faded. The silence was total, so deep that heartbeats pounded louder. Then, faintly, sound, a dull, rhythmic thump from somewhere above. The passengers froze. Another thump followed, then another, deliberate, steady. Someone gasped. "They found us." But Samuel almost immediately shook his head. The sound was wrong, too irregular, too close. He pressed his ear to the wall, frowning. "That's not men digging," he whispered. "That's the snow settling." A collective breath seemed to leave the car at once. Hope dissolved back into fear. A woman crossed herself. Someone began to cry softly. The candle flickered in the draft of despair that moved through the room like a cold wind. As the day passed, the temperature dropped lower. Frost crept across the inside of the walls, forming delicate white veins. The wooden benches grew hard and slick to the touch. Samuel ordered the stoves lit again, one at a time, carefully, to stretch the last of their coal. The faint heat revived a few spirits enough that murmurs began again. Memories, prayers, soft songs hummed to fill the emptiness. In one corner, Clara read aloud from her notebook, her voice trembling but clear. "The world outside sleeps, and inside we wait, between two winters." The one we have already survived. And the one still waiting for us, outside the snow. Others listened in silence, some closing their eyes, imagining open skies, the warmth of sunlight, the scent of pine without frost. For a brief, fragile moment, they believed in spring again. But when the last candle burned out, the darkness completely claimed the car. A darkness so complete, it felt as if it were breathing. And high above them, unseen through tons of ice and snow, the wind began to howl again, restless, wild, and indifferent. By what the passengers guessed was the fourth morning, the air had grown thin enough that every breath was slow and deliberate. The stoves now burned low, fed by the finos of olefuels of coho. The warmth they provided was fragile, barely more than a sigh of heat that reached only those nearest to it. Beyond a few feet, the cold reclaimed everything, creeping back along the walls, fighting through coats and wool blankets like a patient tide. Samuel Crane sat with Eli Turner in the cab, both exhausted, both silent. The window panes were coated in a thick frost that shimmered faintly when their lantern flickered. Eli's voice was hoarse when he finally spoke. "Have you ever thought," he said quietly, "how strange it is that something as soft as snow can bury steel?" Samuel didn't answer at first. He just looked down at his gloved hands. The black smudges of coal ground into the creases of his skin. "It's not the snow," he said at last. "It's the waiting that's what buries you." In the cars behind them, the passengers stirred restlessly. Some had begun to cough. The dry, shallow cough of air to cold and thin. Conductor Avery rationed the remaining candles and food, dividing a loaf of bread and a tin of beans into careful portions. When he spoke, it was always in a calm, even tone, though his lips had begun to pale from the cold. Clara Hensley kept writing, her hand trembling so much she could barely form the words. Her journal was nearly full now, every page filled with tiny, grounded script. When fear has nowhere else to grow, a stillness comes, she wrote. It is not calm, it is surrender, a quiet knowing the world above goes on, and we are somewhere beneath it. Listening, the little boy Henry, too, had spoken to her days before, slept beside his mother. Wrapped in layers of shawls, Clara brushed a bit of frost from his curls and felt a pang, not of fear, but of deep tenderness. The human heart, she thought, even buried in silence, still beats. In the dim half-minus light, the passengers began to talk again, quietly, almost reverently. They told stories of past summers, of green fields, of rivers warm enough to wade through barefoot, of bees and lilacs and the taste of sunlight on the tongue. Even the mention of warmth seemed to stir something in them, as if memory itself could thaw what winter had taken. But, as time passed, a faint sound returned, a soft groaning from deep within the mountain. The snow shifted again, subtle, but heavy. The walls creaked. The lantern flame wavered. Alain looked up sharply. "It's moving again," he whispered. Samuel's jaw tightened. "If the snowdrift above gives way, we'll have more snow pressing it. It could collapse the roof." The passengers heard it too. A slow, low rumble like distant thunder turned to stone. Some clasped hands. Others fell silent altogether. The sound came and went, unpredictable, like the breathing of something vast and unseen. Then as suddenly as it had begun, the sound stopped. A deep, absolute stillness once more settled over the train, so profound that for a moment no one dared even exhale. Clara finally whispered into the darkness, "Perhaps the mountain is listening to us," though no one answered. A few passengers nodded quietly as if to agree that in this strange frozen world, the mountain itself had become their witness, the only thing left to hear their stories. By what the survivors later guessed was the fifth day, time had lost all meaning. The rhythms of the world, dawn and dusk, light and shadow no longer existed under the mountain of snow. The passengers of the Northern Express now lived by smaller measures. The flicker of a candle, the crackle of the last embers, the sound of a breath in the dark. Conductor Avery moved slowly through the buried train, a lantern in hand. His footsteps made soft, hollow thuds on the frozen floorboards. He paused in each car, checking faces, whispering words of comfort that carried little weight but much kindness. Just a little longer, he would murmur. They'll come when the weather breaks. The weather, of course, had not broken. Above them, snow still fell, layer upon layer of silence and weight. The avalanche had sealed the mountain pass completely. Even the sound of the wind was now distant, dulled by the tons of ice and snow covering everything. In the dining car, the last of the coal had been burned through the night. A single candle remained, standing in a small brass holder in the center of the car. Its flame steady despite the drafts that whispered through unseen cracks. It cast long, wavering shadows on the walls, the thin silhouettes of the living and the weary. Clara Hensley sat near the candle, her notebook still open, though she could barely see the words she wrote. Her ink had turned sluggish, nearly frozen in its bottle. Still, she wrote, the candle burns lower, but it refuses to die. We watch it as if it were the sun itself, a small, stubborn star in a sky made of snow. Beside her, a woman, Mrs. Townsend, wrapped a scarf tighter around her shoulders. It's strange, she said softly, how a little light can make you forget the dark for a while. Her nodded. Or perhaps it just teaches us how to live with it. Nearby, the little boy Henry stirred in his sleep, his face pale but peaceful. His mother stroked his hair, humming a lullaby so softly it was almost inaudible, a tune that carried memories of warm kitchens and open fields. Eli Turner quietly entered, his eyes rimmed with rage from cold and fatigue. The engine is frozen solid, he said. It's useless now. It's just a shell. Samuel Crane followed silently behind him. He looked at the passengers, their faces lit by that single flickering light, and felt something stir in his heart, something fragile but fierce. Then we stay alive for each other, he said quietly. That's all we can do. They sat together through the long, endless hours that followed. The candle burned steadily, but small flamed dancing in the chill air. Everyone watched it, not just for the light, but for proof that warmth and hope still existed. Even here, even now, when Clara finally closed her notebook for the night, she whispered to herself, if this is to be the last light we see, it burned long enough to be remembered. And still, impossibly, the candle did not go out. It burned through the night, through the creaking of the walls, through the sighs of sleeping passengers, through the breath of the mountain above, still and wavering like a heartbeat made of flame. By the 6th day, the passengers began to feel the sharp edge of hunger. The food had long been stretched thin. The last crumbs of bread and tins of beans were shared with careful deliberation. The warmth from the stoves was fading, leaving the passengers to huddle closer to one another, drawing comfort from human proximity rather than flame. Clara Hensley noticed the changes more than most. People's voices had grown quieter, words chosen sparingly. Children clung to their mothers' coats, frightened by the silence, by the emptiness outside. Even the adults moved slowly, conserving energy, conserving breath, conserving hope. Samuel Crane checked the stoves, scraping together the last bits of coal. Every small ember was precious. Eli Turner's face was drawn and pale, his hands trembling from cold, hunger, and exhaustion. We cannot last much longer like this, he muttered. Avery moved among the passengers, offering what little encouragement he could. Steady now, he said, one ration at a time. We'll get through this. His words were soft, almost a prayer, that they offered a thread of calm, a reminder of human endurance. In the third class car, farmer from Idaho, Mr. Whitaker, began to tell stories of past harvests, of golden wheat fields, of corn that reached above his head, of the smell of earth after rain. The words were simple, but they sparked something faint in the others. Memories, longing, and the faintest flicker of joy in the midst of fear. Clara wrote in her notebook, her hand slightly shaking. Hunger quietly gnaws at us, not with fury, but with persistence. Every pang reminds us that we are alive, that we are still here, breathing beneath the mountain, And still we wait. The little boy Henry curled up in his mother's lap. Bummered. I'm hungry. His small voice carried more than words. A note of despair. Of innocence tested by the world above and the cold pressing down. His mother stroked his hair. Spring reassurances that felt hollow even to her own ears. She handed him a tiny piece of bread, and he ate it as though savoring the sweetest thing he had ever tasted. Around him, other passengers did the same, every small portion cherished as though it were a treasure. The candle in the dining car burned low, yet stubbornly. Its flame flickered against the dark, casting shadows that moved as if they were living things. The passengers watched it as if it were a guide, a reminder that even in the deepest darkness, there could be light. Outside, the blizzard continued its endless watch. The snow pressed silently against the train, a constant weight of power beyond, a reminder of patience and indifference. And inside, the people of the Northern Express learned slowly how to endure, how to live within the cold, how to survive beneath the mountain's quiet gaze. By the seventh day, a strange, frozen stillness had settled over the train. The passengers moved like shadows, their movements deliberate and slow, conserving every ounce of energy. The air was thin and sharp, every inhalation a reminder of the preciousness of life beneath the mountain of snow. Even the small noises, the creak of a bench, the child's soft murmur seemed amplified in the silence, echoing between the cars like ghostly whispers. Samuel Crane spent most of the day in the cab, staring at the frost-covered windows, listening to the faint shifting of snow above. Eli Turner sat beside him, his face pale, his hands tightly clasped around his knees. "Do you think anyone knows we're here?" Eli softly asked. Samuel didn't answer immediately. He just listened, straining for any sound beyond the snow. Finally, he said, "They'll come. They have to come." His voice was steady, but the uncertainty behind it was palpable. Inside the passenger cars, Conductor Avery moved carefully among the passengers. Blankets were aired, coats wrapped tighter, the remaining food divided even more meticulously. Heather was becoming a companion now, patient and insistent. Clara Hensley sat near the central stove, her notebook open. Her ink had thickened, nearly freezing in the cold, but she continued to write, her words small and careful. "The silence presses on us." Even the children moved quietly now, as if aware of the mountain's presence, as if the snow itself listens to our every breath. There is a beauty in the silence, cruel and gentle. All at once, a small group of passengers had begun to share stories, memories of summers, of blooming gardens, of the smell of fresh bread, of rivers clear and cold. These recollections, soft and fleeting, carried them away from the cold, if only for a moment. The little boy Henry pressed his face to the glass, tracing shapes in the frost with his fingers. "Mama," he whispered, "will we see the sky again?" His mother held him close, her voice slightly trembling. "We will, dear. One day soon, we will see it again." She dared not admit. She did not know how soon that day might come. The candle in the dining car burned low, its flame a tiny pulse of hope. Every flicker seemed to breathe life into the passengers, reminding them they were still here, still alive, still waiting beneath the snow. Outside, the mountain remained silent. The blizzard had quieted, but the snow pressed in yielding lie against the train. Above it all, the wind whispered faintly, a reminder of a world that existed beyond this frozen tomb. As night fell again, or what felt like night in this endless gray, the passengers huddled together, listening to their own slow, steady breathing, finding comfort in each other's presence and in the faint, stubborn light of the candle that would not die. By the 8th day, the dim light of the candle was more than just illumination. It was a marker of time, a fragile heartbeat in the frozen silence. The passengers moved carefully around it, avoiding any sudden motion that might snuff out its flame. Every shadow it cast seemed to sway and stretch like a living thing, dancing on the frost-covered walls and wooden benches. Samuel Crane stood in the cab, looking out at the frost-clad view beyond the glass. The snow piled higher, pressing against the train like a silent, patient giant. Eli Turner shuffled behind him, vraying from cold and exhaustion. Feels like we're the last people on Earth, Eli muttered. Samuel didn't respond. He could only watch, listen, and wait. There was a rhythm to survival now. Measured, deliberate, small. Every breath, every movement, every whispered sound had to be conserved. In the dining car, Clara Hensley slowly wrote in her notebook, her pen scraping faintly on the nearly frozen paper. We're shadows now, and the mountain is lightless. Memory carries us. The warmth of the sun, the scent of rain, the taste of bread unrationed. That is all we have to hold on to. Nearby, Mrs. Townsend gently brushed her little daughter's hair, humming a tune she barely remembered. The melody floated through the frozen car like a wisp of warmth, softly fighting the hush of the snow pressing in from outside. The little boy Henry traced his fingers along the frosted window, trying to make shapes in the ice. I want to see trees again, he whispered, his voice small. You will, Clara said softly, though even she could not be sure. One day, you will see them, the passengers huddled in their blankets and coats, soon, quietly sharing memories, stories of gardens, of rivers, of sunlight striking the leaves of trees. Every memory became a small shield against despair, a reminder that life existed beyond the snow, beyond the silence, beyond the frozen tomb they now called home. Samuel and Eli checked the stoves again, making sure the embers were carefully tended. The heat, though faint, was a lifeline. The passengers leaned close, savoring it, drawing comfort from the glow. Outside, the mountain remained still, yet the snow pressed relentlessly against the train. Occasionally, a faint groan or creak would ripple through the cars, a reminder of the immense weight above. Every sound was a whisper of the mountain's presence, patient, indifferent, eternal. As the night deepened, the passengers lay close together, listening to the soft hum of each other's breathing, finding solace in the presence of others, in the flicker of the candle, and in the memory of a world beyond the frozen stillness. By the 9th day, the passengers of the Northern Express had settled into a fragile rhythm of survival. Every movement, every rationed bite of food, every careful breath was deliberate. The mountain above pressed quietly but heavily, a constant reminder of their fragility. The candle in the dining car had burned down to a stub, yet it flickered stubbornly, casting long, wavering shadows on the walls. Some passengers watched it, as if it were or fallen into their hands. Proof that light could endure even in the deepest darkness. Samuel Crane and Eli Turner cautiously moved through the cars, checking the stoves and making sure no small fire had gone out. Their faces were lined with fatigue, their eyes shadowed from sleepless nights and the constant weight of responsibility. We need to keep them calm, Samuel murmured. The air is fine for now. The panic will be our undoing. Conductor Avery offered quiet reassurances, slowly moving among the passengers. Steady, he said. We wait. We endure. That's all we can do. His words, soft as they were, held the authority of someone who had faced storms before, who understood that hope often depended on maintaining composure. In the second-class car, Clara Hensley sat by the remaining warmth of the stove. Her journal was open despite the stiffness in her fingers. She carefully wrote, "There is something fragile here. Thread of hope we cling to. Candle burns. The stove glows. The hearts around me still beat. These small lights in the dark and the cold. Enough to carry us." The little boy Henry again pressed his face to the glass, as if he could see through the snow that covered the mountains. "Do you think anyone is coming for us?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Clara knelt beside him. "Yes," she said softly. "Someone will come. They will find us." Even as she spoke, her words seemed to ignite a quiet courage among the passengers. Faces that had grown pale with fear showed a faint hint of resolve. Hands clasped more tightly, blankets were wrapped closer. Hearts beat just a little steadier. Outside, faint murmur moved through the snow, the sound of ice shifting, and the distant sound of wind, almost imperceptible, nothing to cause alarm. Yet somehow, it felt like a message from the world above. They had not been forgotten. Through the long, slow day, the passengers focused on survival, on the warmth of companionship, and on the stubborn candle that refused to die. It was a small cluster of flame. It had carried the weight of courage, of human persistence, and of hope that life could endure even in the deepest silence. And as night fell once more, or what passed for night under the mountain, the passengers huddled close, listening to the faint, steady breathing around them, and felt for the first time in days that perhaps they could survive another night. By the 10th day, the air inside the Northern Express had grown almost brittle. Every inhalation carried the sharp reminder that they were confined under the weight of a frozen mountain. Stoves burned low, the last scraps of coal carefully conserved. The passengers moved cautiously, conserving energy, conserving warmth, conserving hope. Samuel Crane slowly walked through the cars, his eyes scanning each face. Fatigue had settled into everyone. Lines were deeply etched. Movements slowed, voices hushed. Even Eli Turner, usually restless and jittery, moved with deliberate caution, checking the stoves and monitoring the thin flow of oxygen. Conductor Avery quietly spoke to the passengers. "We must wait. There's nothing to do until rescue comes. Stay calm, ration, stay warm. Every small effort matters." His words, soft as a whisper, carried the weight of experience, a guide for those clinging to the edge of despair. In the dining car, Clara Hensley sat with her notebook, trying to capture the small miracles of survival. The candle burned stubbornly, flickering on the frost-lined walls. She wrote, "Time stretches and bends here. Moments feel like hours. Hours feel like days." Yet, in the dim glow of the candle, in the soft hum of breath around me, I sense life persists. "We are under the mountain, and we endure." The passengers responded to her quiet observation, sharing stories of home and sunlight, of warmth and spring. The recollections were bittersweet, yet they infused the group with a fragile courage. Henry pressed close to his mother, whispered stories of the gardens he imagined, of running barefoot through grass, visions that seemed almost real in the candlelight. Outside, the snow remained silent, but heavy, a solid, indifferent weight pressing against the train. Occasionally, a faint groan or shift could be heard as the mountain settled, a reminder of the power above. As night descended, it was a pale gray shadow more than darkness. Passengers gathered near the stove, wrapping themselves tightly in blankets. The candle's flame persisted, stubborn against the chill, a fragile heart of light in the frozen silence. Samuel sat with Eli in the cab, their shoulders touching for warmth. "We wait," Samuel said quietly. "We wait. We endure." Eli nodded, his eyes fixed on the frost-coated window. "The waiting is the hardest part," he murmured, and in that still, quiet space, the passengers learned a difficult truth. Survival was not just about resisting the cold, but about enduring the slow, heavy weight of time itself. By the 11th day, the passengers of the Northern Express had become shadows of themselves. Yet, in their stillness, there was a quiet courage. The warmth from the stoves reached only the center of the car, leaving the edges cold and sharp. Every breath was deliberate, measured. Every passenger was learning to conserve not only strength but hope. Samuel Crane moved through the cars, inspecting faces and bodies. Fatigue lay heavy in every movement, the strain etched into the passengers' features revealed by the pale light of the candle. Eli Turner checked the stoves again beside him, making sure the last embers did not die. Their hands, blackened by cold, only slightly trembled, a testament to sheer endurance. Conductor Avery whispered words of reassurance to those nearby. "Stay steady. One breath, one day at a time. We are alive, and that matters." His voice, though soft, seemed to lift a fraction of the fear pressing down on the group. Clara Hensley, notebook on her lap, slowly wrote. Her hand stiffened in the cold, the ink dragging on the frozen pages. "The mountain above is quiet now, almost gentle. The snow presses, yet we feel it less with each day. Perhaps it respects the life it holds beneath. Perhaps it waits with us." Some passengers murmured in low tones, sharing memories, the scent of pine needles in summer, the warmth of a hearth, the laughter of children running through fields. Every recollection was a fragile lifeline binding the group together. Even little Henry whispered stories of imagined adventures, his voice soft but persistent, a reminder that imagination could persist where the body felt weak. The candle flickered stubbornly, its small flame, a heartbeat in the dark. It illuminated the small acts of kindness, blankets shared, hands held, sad reassurances. These gestures, though quiet, were powerful proof that human connection could endure even under tons of snow. Outside, the snow lay silent, the mountain unmoving, yet occasionally a soft groan or creak echoed through the cars, the subtle language of weight shifting, a reminder that the world above was alive, patient, and indifferent. That night, as the passengers huddled together near the candle and stoves, Clara softly whispered to herself, "We endure because we must. We endure because we are here." The quiet courage of those under the snow became palpable, a strength that did not roar or shine, but simply existed, steady and unwavering in the face of the relentless mountain. By the 12th day, the Northern Express had settled into a stillness that felt almost permanent. The blizzard above had eased, leaving only the heavy weight of snow pressing down on the train. The air inside was sharp and cold, every breath deliberate, every movement measured. Yet in this frozen quiet, a fragile thread of hope began to weave itself among the passengers. Samuel Crane carefully moved from car to car, checking the stoves, rationing coal, and offering quiet words of reassurance. His face was drawn with fatigue, but his eyes retained the faintest glimmer of determination. Beside him, Eli Turner moved with slow precision, handing the embers that still glowed faintly. Every small spark was aflame against the indifference of the mountain. In the dining car, the last candle burned low, yet its stubborn flame cast a golden light on the frost-menace-lined walls. Clara Hensley sat near it, pen in hand, her fingers stiff but moving. She wrote, "Beyond the snow, beyond the silence and weight, something whispers of life. Perhaps the sun, perhaps spring, perhaps the world itself remembering us. We cling to that whisper, fragile though it is." Around her, the passengers murmured softly, recounting fragments of their lives before the storm. A farmer spoke of the smell of earth in early May. A mother hummed a song from her youth. Little Henry traced imagined shapes in the frost on the window, a dream of forests and meadows. Every memory, every soft sound became a lifeline in the frozen dark. Conductor Avery slowly moved through the cars, his voice gentle but steady. "We endure," he said. "We wait, and we remember that even here beneath the snow there is life." Outside, the mountain remained quiet, the snow unmoving, but the world above was beginning to change. Imperceptibly, a faint light shifted in the sky, too dim to see clearly, yet enough to suggest the long night of snow and storm was easing. The wind whispered faintly, carrying a promise of thaw, a hint that time was still moving forward. The passengers clung to each other, to warmth, to memory, and to the flickering candle that would not die. They had survived the avalanche, the storm, and the endless weight of snow, and now, under the still mountain, a glimmer of something beyond, perhaps rescue, perhaps spring, had begun to stir. By the 13th day, subtle change had begun to ripple through the air inside the Northern Express. The stifling chill was still present, but the oppressive weight of the cold had lessened slightly. The passengers first noticed it in the air, a faint, almost imperceptible shift, like a breeze sneaking through cracks in the mountain of snow above. Samuel Crane stood at the cab window, pressing a gloved hand against the frost. Outside, the snow faintly glimmered in a light different from the gray monotone they had endured for days. It was not yet sunlight, too pale, too diffuse, but it carried the promise of warmth. "It's changing," Samuel murmured, almost to himself. "The storm has ended. We may see the sky soon." Eli Turner, crouched by the embers in the cab, slowly nodded. "Feels like the mountain is letting go." he said. His voice was quiet, cautious, as if speaking too loudly might shatter the fragile hope. Inside the passenger cars, the subtle thaw bred a new awareness. The frost that had once coated the walls like delicate lace began to melt into tiny droplets, gathering along the edges of the windows and forming slow, glistening trails down the glass. Every drip echoed softly in the quiet, the gentle percussion that reminded the passengers they were still alive, still enduring. Clara Hensley watched the droplets. Her pen paused above her notebook. She wrote, "The snow begins to soften. The mountain, patient and indifferent, starts to release its grip. We feel it in the air, in the walls, in the slow drip of melting frost. Life returning, quiet but unstoppable." The passengers now spoke more freely, whispers of hope threading through the skies. Henry pressed his face to the window, his eyes wide with wonder. "I think I can see the sky," he whispered. His mother held him close, tears glimmering on her cheeks. "Soon, dear," she whispered. "Soon." Conductor Avery carefully checked the stoves and rationed the remaining coal, allowing each car a fraction more warmth. "Steady," he said to everyone. "We survived the mountain. We still endure, and now the mountain begins to yield." Outside, the snow above shifted subtly, settling with small murmurs and groans. It was no longer the suffocating weight of days past, but a slow, deliberate movement, the mountain breathing after the storm, releasing the long grip it had held on the trapped train. That night, the passengers lay together, feeling the faint warmth of the thaw beginning to seep into the frozen walls. The candles still flickered, steadfast as ever, and for the first time in nearly 2 weeks, hearts were lighter, even in the lingering cold. They sensed that the world beyond the snow still existed, waiting, patient, and ready to welcome them back. By the 14th day, the subtle thaw had begun to awaken a new awareness among the passengers. The snow above now shifted more audibly, not with the violent roar of an avalanche, but with low, deliberate groans of the mountains slowly settling. Every creak, every sigh of ice and snow felt like a voice speaking from above. Samuel Crane pressed his ear against the cab wall, listening intently. Eli Turner crouched beside him, eyes wide and alert. "It's like the mountain is alive," Eli whispered, his breath fogging in the cold air, "like it's talking to us." Samuel slowly nodded. "It is alive," he murmured, "and it's letting us know it will let us go." Inside the passenger cars, Conductor Avery moved carefully, offering soft reassurances to those too exhausted to hope. "Steady," he said. "Listen to those sounds. The mountain is settling. We are safe for now. Stay calm." The candle in the dining car flickered with a steady flame, its light casting warm shadows on the frost-lined walls. Clara Hensley sat nearby, her notebook open. Her hand moved slowly, capturing the subtle miracle of the moment. The mountain now whispers instead of roaring. Every groan and crack carries patience, not threat. "Oh, listen." And in listening, we understand. Survival is still possible. Little Henry pressed his tiny hands to the window, tracing the slow trickle of melting frost. "I can hear it too," he whispered. "It's talking to us." His mother smiled, tears shining in the candlelight. "Yes, dear," she said softly. "It's telling us to be patient, to endure. And soon we will be free." Passengers huddled together, listening to the subtle symphony of the mountain's voice. Every creak inside carried both warning and promise, a reminder of the immense power above, and a reassurance that their ordeal was nearing its end. The stoves provided faint warmth. The candle glimmered stubbornly, and the mountain itself seemed to breathe with it, patient, immense, and indifferent. Yet under its weight, the passengers felt a quiet courage, the courage to endure, to hope, and to survive. And as night fell once more, he found stillness settled over the train. The world outside was returning ever so slowly, and the people under the snow understood. They were listening not just to a mountain, but to life itself, calling them back from the frozen silence. By the 15th day, the shift in the mountain's grip became more tangible. The snow pressing against the train walls softened slightly, and small trickles of water began to run down the windows, forming tiny rivulets that caught the faint light of the candle. Every drop was a reminder that change was possible, that the world beyond the mountain still existed, waiting to be reclaimed. Samuel Crane carefully moved through the cars, checking the stoves and observing the passengers. Faces once drawn with exhaustion now showed faint traces of relief, as if the subtle warmth seeping through the walls had seeped into their spirits as well. Eli Turner followed closely, scraping frost from the windows where he could, letting slivers of light filter into the dim car. Conductor Avery spoke quietly to those nearby. "The walls are thawing. We can feel it. Every small change counts. Stay calm. Conserve your strength and believe we will see the sky again." Clara Hensley sat near the central stove, notebook in hand. Her pen hovered over the page, capturing the delicate transformations of their frozen world. The walls we thought were solid had begun to soften. Little beads of water glisten along the frost like stars. Life whispers in the smallest movements. Thawing, yielding, a reminder that nothing is permanent, not even the mountain. Fenry pressed his cheek to the window, his eyes wide with wonder. "It's like the snow is crying," he whispered, but happy tears. His mother wrapped him closer, a faint smile touching her lips. "Yes, dear," she said. "The snow is letting us go." The candle in the dining car flickered, stubborn against the lingering chill. Passengers huddled near it, sharing its warmth for small comfort. Their murmured stories and soft songs blending with the gentle drip of melting frost. Even Samuel allowed himself a moment to breathe deeply, feeling the air grow just slightly easier to draw. The weight of the mountain above was still immense, but it no longer pressed a suffocating lie. For the first time in over 2 weeks, the passengers sensed movement, not as a threat, but as a sign of release. Outside, the mountain groaned softly, the snow settling unshifting in slow, deliberate rhythms. The world beyond the frozen pass began to reclaim its form, hinting at the life that waited above. And beneath it all, the passengers of the Northern Express rested, huddled together, listening to the drip of melting walls and feeling the faintest pulse of hope returning to their weary hearts. By the 16th day, the world inside the Northern Express began to change in almost imperceptible ways. The air, though still cold, felt lighter. The frost along the walls had begun to melt into tiny sparkling beads that reflected the faint glow of the candle, and the soft dripping of water from above became a rhythm, a quiet song of survival. Samuel Crane stood at the cab window, pressing a gloved hand against the cold glass. Beyond the frost, the snow appeared to shimmer with a pale, diffuse light. Not yet sunlight, but a hint of dawn, a suggestion that the long night was easing. Eli Turner crouched beside him, squinting, trying to make out shapes and shadows in the snow. "It's brighter," Eli murmured. "I think we might see the sky today." Samuel allowed himself the smallest of nods, a rare smile brushing his tired face. "It's coming," he said softly. "It's finally coming." Inside the passenger cars, the soft glow from the melting walls reflected across faces, warming them more than the weak stoves ever could. Conductor Avery moved carefully, offering quiet words of encouragement. "Steady," he said. "Breathe. One step at a time. We are closer than we think." Clara Hensley watched the light. Pen in hand, she wrote. "The snow begins to surrender its grip. Light pierces the frost, soft and fragile, yet undeniable. The mountain releases us slowly, carefully, and with it comes the first true breath of morning we have felt in endless days." Henry pressed his small hands to the glass, his eyes wide. "I think I see colors," he whispered. "Green, baby blue." His mother held him close, smiling through tears. "Yes, dear," she said. "The world is waiting for us again." The candle in the dining car flickered stubbornly, its warm glow blending with the soft morning light filtering through the frost. The passengers shared quiet murmurs, gentle stories, and whispered encouragements, the simple human connections that had kept them alive through their long ordeal. Outside, the mountains settled with faint groans, the snow yielding slowly, deliberately, like a giant exhaling after holding its breath. The world above the pass began to reclaim its form. And for the first time in over 2 weeks, the trapped passengers allowed themselves to imagine a sky beyond the snow. Huddled together, they felt the thawing walls, the faint light, and the soft drip of melting frost, as if they were gifts, proofs that the mountain, patient and indifferent though it had been, was now allowing life to return. By the 17th day, the subtle thaw brought a change deeper than warmth or light, the faint scent of air from outside the train. It was hard to describe, a crisp, clean note carrying hints of pine, earth, and snow untouched by human hands. The passengers first noticed it in the cab. Samuel Crane pressed his face to the frost-covered window, inhaling slowly, savoring the tiny whisper of freedom. Eli Turner followed his lead, closing his eyes and letting the fainter aroma fill his lungs. "It smells like hope," he said almost reverently, "like the world is out there waiting." Inside the passenger cars, the scent of fresh air began to drift, carried through small cracks in the frozen walls. Conductor Avery moved carefully, his voice soft but steady. "Breathe slowly. Take it in. This is life returning." Clara Hensley sat near the candle, notebook open, her pen lightly scratching across the page as she wrote. "The air from beyond the snow is here, fragile and sweet. It is a reminder that we are not trapped forever, that life above continues, and we, to continue. Every inhalation is a gift, every breath a small triumph over the mountain that has held us for so long." Henry pressed his tiny nose to the window, his eyes sparkling. "I think I can smell flowers," he whispered. His mother smiled, holding him closer. "Soon, dear, soon, we will feel them under our feet, too." The passengers murmured softly to one another, sharing the small joy of the scent and the quiet knowledge that the blizzard's grip was finally loosening. Their movements became more confident, their voices slightly stronger, as if the mountain's release was seeping into their very bones. The candle flickered in its stubborn way, casting long shadows that danced on the walls, now streaked with melting frost. Even in this dim light, there was beauty, a quiet, patient beauty born of survival, endurance, and the slow reclaiming of life from the frozen silence. Outside, the snow shifted with soft groans and occasional crunches, settling as the mountain exhaled its long held breath. The world beyond called faintly, delicately, and the passengers listened with hearts full of cautious hope. Huddled together, they felt the thaw not only in the walls and air, but in themselves. It was subtle, quiet, a gentle reminder that life, stubborn, enduring, patient, would continue beyond the snow. By the 18th day, the thaw had deepened enough that the passengers could hear the subtle, gentle murmur of water running along the walls and floorboards of the Northern Express. Tiny rivulets formed along the frost-lined windows, slowly drifting onto the wooden boards. Every drop echoed softly, a delicate percussion of release, of the mountains, surrender, and of life returning. Samuel Crane carefully moved through the cars, listening to the quiet music of falling snow. Every sound, faint and irregular, carried a message of hope. He paused near the dining car, watching the water catch the candlelight in 100 tiny reflections, flickering like a field of stars. Eli Turner knelt beside one of the trickling streams, gingerly dipping a gloved finger into it. "It's alive," he whispered. "Even the snow is alive. And it's letting us live, too." The passengers gathered near the edges where the water trickled most steadily, allowing themselves to notice the small miracle. Conductor Avery encouraged them to savor it, to listen carefully. "Hear it," he said softly, "life finding its way back to us." Clara Hensley wrote in her notebook, her handwriting slow and deliberate. "Water moves rice once ruled. It sings softly, patiently, a melody of return. Every droplet reminds us that the mountain, patient and immense, is not forever. Even the heaviest weight yields to time, warmth, and persistence." Little Henry reached out to touch a droplet, giggling softly as it slid down the glass, like tiny rivers. He whispered. His mother smiled, brushing his hair from his forehead. "Yes, Dear, soon we will walk beside rivers that run freely in the sunlight. The candle continued to flicker steadfast against the chill and shadows, and the thawing walls and dripping water created a rhythm of reassurance. The passengers moved carefully around the slowly pooling water. Every drop was a reminder of resilience, of endurance, and of the quiet promise of life beyond the snow. Outside, the mountain shifted with subtle shifts, the snow gently settling into new forms, the air carrying the distant, lean scent of freedom. Beneath the frozen weight that had held them so long, the passengers listened to the whisper of water, letting it calm their weary hearts. By the 19th day, the subtle changes inside the Northern Express culminated in a miracle that had seemed impossible during those long frozen nights. The snow above the train had softened enough that a small sliver of the outside world became visible through a narrow gap in the cab window. Samuel Crane pressed his face close to the glass, squinting through the thin veil of frost. Beyond the snow, it was no longer an impenetrable wall of pure white, a sliver of sky, an extremely faint, pearl-minus gray color. Like a long minus